rulers and also templates with like circles, ellipses, and all that. French curves, like everybody should have a few of these. You can always find a way, even if you don't have the precise circle you need and all that, you can work around that, but you can still use these things. But it's also a good thing to learn, I think, to trace ellipses, straight lines and all that as much as possible free-handed. That's a good school, and you'll need that anyway. Even if you use every tool available to you, there will be a time where you need to be able to do that. And that's just an exercise like any other, so it's a good thing. Don't depend too much on your tools. Get good tools, learn to use them, don't always depend on them. That's, at least works for me.
Out of curiosity, how many of you are actually thinking of breaking into comics as an
Show of hands?
Show of hands. The few, the proud.
Anybody? No?
Well,
okay.
Yes? No? She's like, yeah, I'm just in my pocket. Leave me alone. I'm saying no. Okay.
One note on ellipses and curves. Sometimes you might get a penciler who will actually use those tools in their work, and sometimes, at least in my case, and I'm sure Christian with Doug, he likes to freehand everything, every single ellipse and curve. So then that's our job to use the tools to clean it up, and sometimes you can't find an ellipse that'll actually match what the penciler drew, so you kind of have to mix and match, do parts of one
With
and then,
Doug every time.
then connect it with,
I hate him every time he does that.
Yeah, he does that all the time.
I'd say more than anything, if you want to ink something, no matter if it's for comics or for yourself, think of three basic things: your foreground, middle ground, and background.
Okay.
One of them should have the most black. Your line weight really determines whether or not something pops out. I remember doing something, forgot the name of the book, with Ralph Cabrera. He's like a nut on details. And I had a big guy in the foreground in chains. And he did this elaborate scene in the background, water, ocean, like 100 people. And I said, how can I make this guy stand out? Because the way he drew it, it was beautiful, but somehow it just didn't click. And what I ended up doing was just rendering the main guy fairly normal in a heavy line. And then as things started progressing down the hill, I started varying my line weight. I started using the curl quill to get a thinner line weight. Towards the end, it was pretty much like a dead line weight. Mostly, if something he had in shadow, I would do it in line. There was no solid black. And at the end, the piece stood out as he intended, which was to have that main focal guy. And so sometimes you have to interpret something that's in pencil. It's completely different in ink. You have to think of what's going to be published, the way it's going to look, and what's going to be legible, and where you want to train the eye to go, or what the main focus on the page is, or on the panel. So think about those three things when you're inking.
It's very good advice. It's very important. Like when you get a pencil page in front of you, take 2-3 minutes, take a good look at it. And even if you think what you're saying is obvious, just look at each panel and make sure you understand everything you see on the page. And while you do that, mentally start to think what's important there, what are the strong outlines I'm going to start to work on first. And like every page or every panel, you can basically like simplify to the maximum to just like a strong outline. Make sure you identify these when you first start to work on it, and then you take care of the details. But it's really good advice. Like pay close attention to that, and from there on you start strong with the foreground, and you indeed like go lighter as you go, as it is in real life. You look at a horizon, it's not as sharp as what you see obviously right in front of you, and you have to recreate that impression.
Yeah, when something's way out in the background, it's called atmospheric perspective. And if you ever see, let's say you stand up in a building and you look outside and you're seeing something maybe a mile away, your eye kind of fools you. You know that building is straight, but the way you actually perceive it, you can actually freehand it if you're good. You don't even have to go back there and use a ruler. In fact, personally, I prefer not to use a ruler on something that's too far, because you want that imperfection, because that's the way it really shows. Even though it is something hard and physical, you render it differently. Again, you're trying to give mood and feeling through inks. So
Unless you have,
one of the ways you achieve.
unless you have perfect vision and like tiny little thing in the background is super crystal clear, it's just not going to be that way. So yeah, I mean, it's very important. Line weight by itself, thick and thin lines as an inker, but basic line weight as a whole is very important when you're making your page, because if you have a basic line weight up in the foreground, then obviously when you get towards the back, it's going to be less, the detail is going to be less. That's really something you got to think about. If you have a lot of really thin detail and line on your main figure in the front, it's going to mesh in the background, it's going to blend in the background, and it's not going to be sticking out, it's not going to be having that umph. Even though there's a lot of detail and it looks really nice rendered, it's not going to be popping out. So.
And also I want to add that, the stuff that's mentioned here as far as atmospheric perspective, the best thing you can possibly do as an inker is to learn how to draw. I've always said this, the better artist you are, the better inker you're going to be. Little design rules and atmospheric or rules and stuff like that, that's applied in drawing and painting and everything. The difference is, when you ink, you have only black and white to deal with. So, you want to replicate something that's far away. Well, in a realistic painting, say something that's far away will not be as contrasty. It won't be as detailed, and it's not as sharp. And you want to find a way, you want to think, how do I replicate that in ink with line only? Well, I can make the lines in the background very thin. I cannot put as much detail in it. I cannot put as much black in there. So, you want to think in those terms. You're just trying to, recreate art, but you'll have only black and white to work with.
He's right. Don't separate the inking from the drawing. I mean, in your minds at least, like try to do both. It's important. Like they work together. You cannot dissociate them. That'd be a terrible mistake. You would end up with something sterile in the end.
Because some inkers are literally tracers, and that's where we become the butt of all jokes. Where they're literally just linesmiths, and all they do, some of them think of their job is to just make pretty lines. My job is to recreate this line, but make it look really nice. But, yeah, you want your lines to look nice when it's appropriate, but you want to know why you're putting down the line that you're putting down. So
there's a technical in inking here, like the technical side, like what kind of brush you use, how do you do such or such line. But there's something important, which is like the essence of it is like the drawing, because in fact you are drawing in ink, except you had a blueprint to do that. Don't make it look like you had a blueprint. This should look in the end like it was the first time it's been drawn with ink. The final line is yours. And I forgot what I wanted to say. Yeah, don't forget that like lines do not exist just by themselves. Every line answers to another one. There's a harmony, there's a balance that's been to be respected. That's what the artist puts on paper, and you have to keep that same harmony while inking. So once again, don't separate both things don't view them as being different things. They're one and the same thing, just technically there are a few differences, that's it.
That was almost hardcore hippie talk right there.
Yeah.
Harmony. Yeah, I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I'm old.
Well, to get what they were saying, when you're starting out, you're not going to be working with artists that are as good as Jim Lee, unfortunately. So yeah, I know. You believe that? I mean, they told me I'd be working with the same people as caliber as Jim Lee and George Perez. So you'll have some people that are not very strong with backgrounds, or doing cars, or trees. Now, if you're an inker, you're going to try to make that look as best as you can without really understanding as an artist how a tree is supposed to look, how lighting's supposed to look. That's why it's very important to be the best artist you can be. Yes, you're inking, but as an artist, you need to be able to fix the background. You need to be able to fix the perspective. You need to be able to make the tire look like a tire. You know what I mean? So while you're thinking about inking, and that's great, be very conscious about becoming the best artist you can be as well. Not being a penciler, but being an artist. Understanding how things work, how they go together, okay? That's very, very important, because you'll have times where you got people that can make great figures and they have no background skill, or they got great background artists, great architecturally background artists, they can't do a figure to save them. They've got a pretty face, but the perspective's on. So as you, as an inker, have to put on your artist cap and make it the best page possible.